So I don't know if you've noticed, but a lot of games come out these days. Here at IndieLoupe, we've set ourselves the achievable task of covering just one of those per week. But this week more than most, that's presented something of a challenge, because there have been a hell of a lot of interesting looking games released over the last 5 days. From Pluto to Pizza Slice, from Piece by Piece to, Piece by Piece. There were a lot of options to choose from. I almost decided to take the easy option and just put out a video highlighting all the games that came out this week. I've actually stuck a compilation of them at the end of this review. But there was one that just, and I do mean just, piqued my interest a little more than the others. Perhaps if I'd been in a slightly different mood when I was looking at them, I could have gone another way, and you'd be watching a review of an entirely different game right now. But man, am I glad that I gave Rhell, Warped Worlds and Troubled Times, the nod ahead of the other possibilities. And if you stick around, I will tell you why. Rhell, Warped Worlds and Troubled Times is the first paid release from interestingly named solo developer SlugGlove. You play as the titular Rhell, a sage, this world's magic users, who is one of only a dozen people who remain in the world. The rest have been sporadically disappearing, there one moment, gone the next. With the way things have been going, it'll only be a matter of time until everyone has vanished completely. Rhell is blissfully unaware of the fact that all of this is unfolding, as she's been locked away in a dungeon for reasons unknown since before the disappearances had begun. That's probably where her story would have ended, if not for the serendipity of a magical book dropping out of a broken pipe, squarely onto her head. That remarkable stroke of luck is somewhat dampened by the fact that the book is almost entirely ruined. It's designed to hold 40 runes worth of pages, but instead comes with only 2, with the other 38 strewn across the world for Rhell to find. To start with, she'll have to make do with only the push rune and the rotate rune, slowly building up her catalogue while attempting to investigate what's happened to all these missing people. Those runes and the system surrounding them are the selling point of Rhell, the reason to be interested in it, the reason to play it, and what I will spend most of this review talking about. Yeah, the art is cute, the story interesting, not to undersell those, because I think if SlugGlove had made a more run-of-the-mill puzzle adventure, it would still have promise, but that rune system was the driving force behind my eagerness to try this one out. To create your spells, you pick up to 5 runes, although it can just be one on its own, and combine them to do, well, pretty much whatever you can think of within the bounds of this game's magic. That can be very simple, using just those 2 starting runes as an example. A spell with 1 push rune will push an item a little bit, a spell with 5 will push it a lot. 1 rotate rune will make something shift 90 degrees, 2 will make it shift 180. A rotate rune combined with some push runes will simultaneously make it rotate and push it away. That's all straightforward enough when you've only got 2 runes to play with, but the possibilities quickly stack up as you unlock more. The game is advertised as having 102,400,000 combinations. There is some crossover from things like a push rune and a pull rune cancelling each other out, but much less than you'd think. And look, I will admit that I was a little skeptical when hearing about that, because on paper, while it doesn't call itself one, it sounds like the most immersive of immersive sims, but I do find that they rarely shape out that way. To step away from Rhell for a second and give a couple of examples, one of our top 10 games from last year was Skin Deep from Blendo Games, which was good fun, obviously, I put it in my top 10, but the main issue I had with that game was that almost every problem I encountered was solved in pretty much the same way. There might have been other options available, though not, I hasten to add, 100 million of them, but even then, when one was far more efficient and easy to pull off than the others, I kept reverting to it. There are 2 other games that came to mind when playing Rhell which are perhaps more thematically in line with it and had a similar problem. Call it the Scribblenauts snag or the Magicka misfortune. Maybe I'm revealing some fundamental lack of creativity, but it felt like in those games, 9 times out of 10, you could use the same item or spell to solve whatever they threw at you. A combination like that doesn't exist in Rhell. While each puzzle has many solutions, one solution can't be used for many puzzles. I won't pretend that there wasn't a free rune combination I proudly came up with and fell back on a lot throughout the game, but it was nothing close to a catch-all. It helped in a lot of situations, but I'd still need to use other methods to solve the overwhelming majority of puzzles. I think I'm going to keep that combination secret. Not to be proprietorial, well, maybe a little bit, but mainly because I think that would, in a way, be worse for your enjoyment than, for example, if I spoiled the game's whole story. That's because the biggest joy that Rhell provides is from finding your own solution to problems. I'd probably had those free runes available for a couple of hours before I thought to put them together, but they are, I think, a pretty niche interaction. I imagine most people will go through the whole game never thinking to put them together, and that's not because I'm oh so clever for figuring it out, but just because there's so many potential combinations and ways to do things. There's almost certainly a better way to do the thing that those runes were doing for me, but that spell was my spell, the IndieLoupe way, if you will. I suppose it's only fair that I do give you at least one example, so here goes. There was a door one time that I wanted to get through when my spellbook was about half complete. If you went close to that door, it slammed shut. I can think of a lot more ways I could do it now. There was, in fact, a much easier way to do it there and then, but my solution was to wedge a cushion into the door from afar. Fine, it's stuck open now, but the gap was still tiny. There is a shrink rune that you can use to make Rhell smaller, but I didn't have it at the time. What I did have was a rune that slams things down and the area rune, one which makes a bubble and applies the spell to everything within it. So I combined those to make an area that slams things down when they enter it. I sent Rhell into it, she got squished down, and there we go, she was small enough to fit through that gap. That is one door in the game, one decision for players to make, with dozens of legitimate solutions before you'd get into the domain of doing things in a ridiculous way, just to prove a point. I have no idea how SlugGlove meant for people to get past that door, but I think that's fascinating. If there's that many ways to approach a door, I'm sure you can imagine how creative you can get with more complex situations. The game describes itself as semi-open world, which to be honest I think is doing itself a disservice. I found it to be about as open world as it gets. It did actually take me a little while to warm up to that. In a way, it was something of an issue for me at the start of the game. There were so many places to explore, and not a huge amount of guidance in terms of which direction I should do that in. There was only one time I can recall the game telling me, no, stop, not this way, but even that wasn't a hard roadblock, and due to the nature of the game, the implied aim being to solve problems as creatively as possible, if anything it had the opposite effect on me, making me even more determined to prove that I could push on, current lack of runes be damned. Due to that openness, there was also one time I couldn't find a location for the life of me, and that was frustrating, but I eventually gave into exploration and ended up finding it through, quite literally, the back door. In doing so, I realised that I had been to the more conventional entrance earlier in the game, but hadn't figured out how to solve the puzzle to get through it. I still haven't figured that out as I opened it from the other side. That does make part of me want to play the game all over again, and to try and access areas in as daft an order, and as daft a way as possible, to really push the boundaries. To that end, there's actually a really interesting game mode, where the game's 500 items are in randomised locations, which, having played about 15 minutes of, I imagine can lead to some bizarre interactions, particularly on account of the order you might end up getting runes in. There'll be runes that you typically get in the early game that you just don't see for hours, and on the other hand, runes that you typically don't unlock until much later in the game, available almost from the off. But before I dive into any of that, I've only found 2 of the game's free endings. There's those 500 items to find, which I've made a decent dent into, but not quite completed, and 2 different sets of challenges available. One in-universe with 40 well-designed puzzle rooms, where you've got access to your spellbook as it is in the game, and another set of currently 19 standalone puzzles accessible from the main menu, but this time with only particular runes unlocked. I've already played over 20 hours and have barely scratched the surface on either of those sets of challenges, but I'm certain that I will get round to all of that. I actually wanted to get this video out earlier in the week, but delayed it largely because every time I sat down to finish writing it, I got pulled back into the game, telling myself I'll do just one thing here or there, and then spending another 4 hours straight as Rhell. That's probably the second best indicator I can give you for how much I've been enjoying it. There's 2 games I want to review for next week, and I've written 31 words on one of them and not played a single minute of the other. Rhell just hasn't let me. The pull to keep going back to it is too great. But that's the second best indicator. The best indicator I can give is through a minor criticism, by pointing out that the dialogue in this game sometimes looks as though it's just been smashed out once and never examined again, in terms of weird capitalizations and typos being pretty commonplace. Yet I, the stickliest of sticklers for that sort of thing, just didn't care. I didn't mind. It felt authentic and right, in a way, for the whimsy of this strange world. So I guess that's the criticism, but I don't know, I don't think I'd want it changed. I have been blown away by how much I love this game, by how creative it is, and by just how much of it there is. I could say a lot more on it, maybe I will one day, but for now I will leave you with a heavy recommendation. Rhell, Warped Worlds and Troubled Times is awarded a 9 out of 10 by IndieLoupe. We will continue with the theme of games that are absolute bangers next Tuesday, I'm hoping, so I will see you back here for that. But for now, it's compilation time. Let me know if this is of value and maybe I'll consider making it into a more regular thing, but if for some reason you're not going to play Rhell, here are your other options from this week. Thanks for watching.